All right, so I know it's midday. Is some of you is hungry? You just can ask me for grissini that I got delivered just now. So I'm gonna tell a story, and all good stories commence with a prologue. And so this is Philippe. Philippe is head of digital transformation, one of the leaders of home assembled furnishing, like an IKEA competitor, which name is Zoot. Zoot is basically what you say when you finish assembling your kitchen after 2 days and you realize that you got wrong the screw at the very first page of the user manual. Philippe has two things in common with reasoning in LLMs. The first one is that he can get really creative when he talks a lot. Maybe not get the best ideas, but very creative. So today he decides to create the Zootbot, which is the chatbot for the company, which helps users navigate through different offers and different variants of the furniture. And the second thing that Philippe has in common with reasoning in LLMs is that he doesn't truly exist, right? So please bear with me as I give this talk about this imaginary friend of mine in front of this wonderful audience. It's not the first time I do this. I mean, that I speak with an imaginary friend, of course. By the way, let's start with chapter 1. So, to build this chatbot, Philippe knows that, of course, he read that on LinkedIn, that all you need is an LLM. Okay, that's all you need, basically. Maybe some data, right? The catalog, just let's hope that the catalog is not just scattered JSON files across the cloud. Maybe another API, simple stuff to get the stock for any given store in France. And that's basically it. No, of course, you need an orchestrator, yeah. So, but it's still very simple stuff. And then some magic lines, you know, the magic lines in the architecture schemas that basically means that anything that is in a magic line will auto-implement itself. And of course, you need a system prompt. And that's all. No, you need the front end, of course, yeah, the front end. And then you have the integrated front end in a website, of course, another magic line. And then you need the deployment pipeline. And then that's simple, right? You need a deployment pipeline for the orchestrator as well. And all of this in some infra as code, because we are in 2025. And let's add on top of it cloud code, because, you know, it works, you know. And so let's go to chapter 2. What actually could go wrong? So it's basically last month. I should be preparing this talk. And my phone rings. Always afraid that when my phone rings is Johan asking me if I finished preparing my talk, which I didn't. But no, instead it's Philippe. And Philippe calls me and very calmly says, bordel de merde, ça marche pas du tout. Which translated in English means it's not actually working as initially intended. What does not work? Well, doesn't truly know, it's too slow, it's too expensive, but do you have data, forward data of course, do you have data to know what's not working? And it doesn't really have it, has it? So, we'll need some monitoring. Of course, I know you people are familiar with monitoring, but please help Philippe. Is an imaginary friend of mine, but of course I can share imaginary friends, right? So monitoring is basically collecting metrics, event, and traces, we'll get to that a bit later, to enable investigation into your systems. Traces, what are actually traces? Is basically, some info that, some building blocks of the call to your app, and especially in particular to your LLM. So here, for instance, we load the prompt, we do a model call to GPT-5, we do some tool use, and we parse the response. So this is what some traces appear in my app, in one of my apps, and you see that you get the latency, the total cost, and so on and so on. Monitoring is not something particularly new. It dates back to the 70s. I wasn't even born by then, probably. But we had a MCP kind of moment in 2020s in which the industry get together to have a standard that most monitoring platforms conform to. And so basically most apps can send the same trace with the same protocol and the same structure of the trace to any platform, monitoring platform provider. This is called open telemetry, and that's interesting because most LLM monitoring platforms actually build upon this stuff. It's refreshingly something which is stable in LLMs, so they basically build on something that's robust since 5-6 years ago. And what you get, just like with normal telemetry, is that you get a chain breakdown, as we saw. So all the steps all the breadcrumbs that compose your chain. You get to read the inputs of your LLM call, the prompts, the outputs, the token count, the cost, of course, the latency, some nice dashboarding on top of it. And since it's built on open telemetry, you also get other third-party API calls, like, for instance, known LLM calls. Let's assume that your model or your app needs to call a third-party service. You get to see them in your dashboards, which is particularly cool if you do tool use. Grissini? No, nobody. All right. So this is how it looks in one of my apps. So once again, the traces with all the spans, all the details. Some key info, so that's very small, but here you can see that we used the GPT-5 Mini, we used 2,000 tokens, we had the latency of 37 seconds, and it cost roughly 4 millicents, as well as the input and the output. So nothing too special here. What's actually interesting, by the way, is that you can add this trace to a dataset. But why would you need this? So let's assume that you have an incident in production and you want to repeat a trace. So you want to see, once you've fixed the issue, maybe change the prompt, if the issue is still there. So once you record this trace, you can replay and at a later moment and see if actually with the same inputs and the same context, the issue will still be there. There's a bunch of LLM monitoring platforms out there. I just picked 4, which are among the most used ones. And let's draw a simple comparison. So they all support open telemetry. Most of them support the EU zone, which is important since if you want to store the dataset, the traces in the datasets, you want these traces probably to stay in Europe for compliance. And most of them, but not all of them, are open source. So you see Langsmith, which is part of the long chain tooling, is not open source. But the other 3, actually you can self-deploy on your own. And something we actually did in some of our apps. Another stuff that I wanted to mention is that I'd rather start tracing even in POCs. It's a very important moment of your app. Maybe you want to know if your colleague or your test users are having issues. And maybe when your colleague tells you, oh, this doesn't work, you know what happened. And In those cases, you can actually leverage the free tier of these platforms, and some of them, for instance, Langfuse, have a kind of a generous free tier. 50K a month is, I'd say, more than enough for most POCs apps. And let's move to chapter 3. So my phone rings again, of course. It's still Philippe, who is very scared because we keep fixing prompts, but users are still happy. We fix prompts over and over again, but people are still unhappy, but we don't know if you were unhappy before we changed the prompt or after we changed the prompt. And basically, all the back and forth, changing and tweaking the prompts is as reliable as a courant mute in a JavaScript final. One solution to this is prompt versioning. The other one is evaluation, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Prompt versioning, basically, if you are into software, you know where this is leading. Basically, you can edit your prompts, and you can save the edits, so you can see the different versions that you did throughout the life cycle of your app. And the interest here is that in a normal app, what you get is that you do some you receive some requests from the user, then you call the LLM. With a monitoring platform, your app can actually receive the request, of course, and then retrieve the latest prompt dynamically, and then do the LLM call. So you might be wondering, I have already my code base. My prompt is in my code base. Should I? Do I really need another solution for versioning my prompts? Of course, if you listen to the platform producers and creators, they'll tell you yes. But at the end of the day, if your prompt versioning strategy in your code base already works, that's something maybe you should keep, because if you have a good CI, any change of the prompt should go through proper testing, and that's something that you should already have in your normal code base. What you don't get is that it's a bit harder to identify which traces use a given prompt. With monitoring solution, you can actually group traces by prompt version, and it's visually more impacting. Yeah, so the other thing you can do is to keep the version in the monitoring solution. That's also best for collaborating, especially if you have known technical people. You just give a login, and they are able to read the prompt, maybe tweak, play with it a bit. And even yourself, maybe sometimes you prefer navigating through a beautiful interface than in your messy, hopefully not, code base. But what happens actually is that those platforms are made to streamline the prompt deployment. So if by any chance somebody pushes a new prompt to production and the prompt breaks your app, you'll see in production and not in the testing phase. What I was saying, but actually with this solution you can group the prompt, as I was saying, and so here you can see that I can navigate the different prompts and see that a given version of the prompt received, for instance, 453 usage, and it's visually more impacting. The third way, I guess you see where I'm going, is that you can mix and match the two solutions. And it's absolutely not hard to do. In fact, I do that in all my AI apps nowadays. Basically, the source of truth is still my code base. The prompts leave my code base. But in the CI, I push new versions of the prompt to the monitoring platform, so I can get collaboration. I can play with the prompts in the UI, and I can group them as I showed you in the previous screenshot. And let's move to chapter 4. And, it's last week I should actually work on this presentation, but Philip calls again, and he tells me, we are receiving hundreds of 404 in productions to Zoot.fr / Swedish meatballs. Of course, the LLM thinks he's working at IKEA and not at Zoot, which is way better, by the way. So how can you avoid this? And the other part of the answer is, of course, evaluation. You have two types of evaluation: offline evaluation and online evaluation. We'll go through rapidly to the two of them. In offline evaluation, you have a fixed data set, but no real-time interaction. And you can have LLMs as a judge to evaluate your prompts using the data sets we talked about. And also known ML evaluators, which means basically Python or JS script that you can add to this monitoring platform to do some simple evaluation. And, it's kind of still powerful because, for instance, in the example we mentioned before of the 404 to pages that don't exist, a very simple known ML scripted evaluation, checking if all links do exist in the real life, would be more than enough. Then again, we have evaluation datasets, which are augmented using the add to dataset feature we mentioned before. And you get evaluator versioning. No, we don't get evaluator versioning, unfortunately. So this is how it looks. So for instance, in this prompt, I can run experiments in the monitoring platform in the same interface in which I added my prompt. But once again, do you really need monitoring platform for evals? Well, one big reason not to use monitoring platforms for evals is that you don't get vendor lock-in. So the evals stay in your code base, and you are not delegating that to a service which might increase their price at some moment in time. And then you can go through proper reviews or your evaluators, which is also very useful. But you're missing, as always, some collaboration and some features that these platforms offer for you, like, for instance, comparing to prompts. Once again, you can trust this platform, especially if you're in a POC phase and you don't want to create your evaluation pipeline on your code base. Then go for it. There are drawbacks, of course, one of which is vendor lock-in. And as always, you can mix and match. So in this case, mixing and matching the two approaches is a bit more complex than in prompt versioning. I'm not sure I would do that for all my projects. It requires a moderate to high engineering effort, but you get kind of the best of two worlds. So you can do evaluation in your code base and then push some info, some evaluation result to the monitoring platform so you can see which prompt performs better. And you get, of course, collaboration. We were talking about offline evaluation. There is also online evaluation, which is performed real-time or kind of real-time on all the traces that are produced by your users in production. And with this, you can also have LLM as a judge, non-ML evaluators, but you also got alerting. So you might want to have alerts of some bad behaviors that is occurring to your LLMs, to your AI apps. For instance, if people are trying to jailbreak your AI app, or if something at some point of time doesn't work anymore as expected. And since you're gonna get a lot of traces, maybe, you can also do sampling. So select just a percentage of the traces on the total amount of traces to reduce the cost, of course. You can also plug user scoring. So if you played with Auto Trivia, you see that we have an hallucination button, and this hallucination button adds more info to our dashboards in our monitoring platform. So this is how it looks, and actually this is taken today with Auto Trivia, and there are people who actually mentioned that one of the questions of the answers probably was hallucinating, and you see that there are some elements that are turning green. We have lots to compare, but this is for your pictures. But basically, most platforms support online and offline evaluation, but just one of them supports evaluation versioning. We are at the end of this talk. I'm almost late, I think. Let's recap. So monitoring is a part of LLM Ops. It's not all LLM Ops. Of course, LLM Ops goes much beyond the technicalities of this stuff. But from a technical point of view, you get much of what you would cover with LLM Ops. It's, once again, most of it is easy to configure, so easy that I would absolutely start recording tracing even from the POCs. Once again, you absolutely regret not having done this. And as you understood, I guess by then, you can assess platform before doing anything to evaluate the trade-offs between doing it yourself or using a third-party platform. So, to recap, to my humble opinion, today, 2025, I'd absolutely use this for tracing. I give 4 out of 4 for tracing, easy to set up, immediate added value. For prompt versioning, I'm a bit less bold on that. I'd give 2 out of 4. Very good for collaboration and very good for iterating, especially in the initial phases of your app, for iterating over prompts. Offline evaluation, to me, is probably the feature that doesn't bring so much added value, in my personal opinion, but online evaluation, analyzing all your traces in production in almost real time is absolutely useful in most cases. I hope I still have some voice, and thank you. I hope you are shared an imaginary friend by now, and well, feel free to ask questions.
Thank you, Simone.